Hey there everybody, happy Friday. It's another week and that means it's time for another making of video. Today's is going to be really cool. For those of you who are following Dreamside that fall into the digital artist category, I think you're going to find this video especially useful. I've recently discovered some very cool things about using brushes in Manga Studio, and I wanted to share them with you today. So I'm going to just show you really quickly just what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a digital brush. So for those of you who maybe aren't too familiar with digital art, this will bring you up to speed. So what a brush really is simply a stamp. It's just an image, a single image, and in this case, lighter pencil here, as you can see, which is a pencil brush that comes with Manga Studio, is really just a circle that has some transparency. So when I click on it again and again, it starts to build up and it creates a darker and darker spot. And what I can do with that is, as I am drawing with it, what I'm doing is I'm dragging the stylus over the screen, I get what appears to be a line. But what this actually is a very repetitive series of stamps of that circle. And that's how digital brushes tend to work. And I have different types of brushes that use different types of stamps. For example, this bleed pencil, if I click, you can barely even see it, but it's there. If I click a few more times, you can see it starts to build up. The idea behind this pencil is that it has sort of a rough appearance. And when I draw with it, it takes a few more times going over before I can make a dark line. So I like to use this bleed pencil to kind of rough things out, and then I tend to go over with the lighter pencil to give it, a more finalized look. So that's how that's a very basic idea of how brushes work. But there are some really, really cool things that you can do. And what I want to do is start by showing you a problem that I've been running into. So I'm going to switch over and show you one of the pages from Dreamside. So if you look at this, you'll notice that it has these really detailed green vines that are moving throughout the page. Okay, now it might, at least it blew my mind anyway, but I think it's pretty amazing to realize that what you're looking at here in the green lines is mostly a brush. And so I'm going to show you how you can actually do that with Manga Studio. And the main reason to do it is, as I was working on this page, I was spending all this time detailing this line work for these vines. And I thought, this is taking so long, and I do this so often, and I repeat this action so many times, that I thought it might be worth it to try and figure out a way to speed up the process. So what I'm going to do is show you how I made that brush. Okay. And before I do that, actually, I want to show you what a ribbon brush is. Okay, so I'm going to switch over into the effects category, and I'm going to go under the ruled lines category. And in here, we have something called a waved line. Now, I'm going to edit something really quickly here. I'm going to just show you what the stamp looks like. So this is what this brush looks like. Okay, now, if I draw with it, it's going to do pretty much the same thing it did with the other brush. It's just going to repeat the image again and again and again in order to create sort of a successive enough series of images to create this appearance of a line. And I can tell it to stamp more or fewer times so that I can create a more solid or loose line. All right, but watch carefully as I zoom in here, and you'll notice something about this. Notice that the top and the bottom line up. So if I were to take this piece and I duplicate it, and then I move it up, look at that. See how it lines up? And now it's twice as long. And if I were to do this again and again, I could eventually make a pretty long strand of this wavy line, right? Okay. But there is a feature already that's included in the brush system that I can use to get that exact same effect. And it's actually what I turned off. So if I go into the subtool detail, under stroke, there's an option called ribbon. And if I click that, you can see exactly what's going to happen here. Instead of stamping the image over and over again, it's going to line the image up end to end so that I can now just simply draw that wavy line. And if I make it smaller, I can get a longer and a line that repeats a little bit more frequently, right? So I can adjust the size. But the other thing that I can do with this is if I wave my hand back and forth as I draw, I can make it curve. And I can draw a curvy, wavy line. And I can, of course, do this any way that I want to. Okay, and it's just going to connect it all together. So that's pretty rad, right? So as I was drawing this, I was thinking about my vines, and I thought, well, what happens if I were to draw my own brush that looks like my line art, and I use the ribbon effect to have it line up in the same way that it works with a wavy line? Well, I did, and this is what it looks like. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So you can see actually where it's starting to loop right here. Because when I made this brush, I didn't do it quite right. I didn't line the ends up. Remember how I showed you how the wave line lined up rather perfectly end to end? Well, this doesn't. See how it kind of fades out? All right. So what you need to make sure that you do is that when you draw whatever it is that you want to use for your brush, you want to make sure that both ends line up perfectly so that when you duplicate and attach them end to end, you want to make sure that they line up and you can't even tell that it's looping. And that way you'll have a really perfect stroke. Of course, I can always come in here with the brush and just draw over it, and just edit it this way and reconnect the two. But to cut down on the amount of time that I spend as thoroughly as possible, I want to make sure that the brush works as well as possible to begin with. Okay, so of course I can now take this wave line. Wave line brush, and I can do whatever I want with it. I can draw any kind of curve, and so you can imagine if I go back to my reference page here, you can see how I constructed this wavy line. Not everything that you see here is just the brush, and that's something that you really have to note. This is not a totally perfect system. Sometimes, for example, if you say you do a brush like this where you have leaves like you see here, well, watch what happens if I bend in a weird way. All right, you can see how it starts to distort. Here's like a distortion here on this leaf. You can see down here how it's messing up. You can also see how the line starts to artifact a little bit when it makes kind of an odd bend. Okay, so you have to understand that to some degree when you use the system, you're probably going to end up doing a bit of cleanup, all right? But that's not really much of a problem because it's so much faster than if you were to do it from scratch. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that this is looping the same bit over and over again. So you might get to the point where you need to add a lot of variation so that you don't end up, I guess, creating the appearance of a lot of repeating elements, because that can sort of look bad. But there is another way to alleviate that. If I go into the brush tip category, you can actually see this is my image under tip shape that it's using for the brush. And what I can do is I can actually load more than one. So for example, I could draw one strand like this, and then I could draw, say, 2 or 3 more. And then I can load those in, and what it will do is it will vary between them all, so that when it goes end to end, it won't use the same one over and over again. So if you want to do a little bit more work, you can end up with a slightly more organic flow, and it just won't give that appearance like it's using the same thing over and over again. But I want to show you one more really cool thing that you can do with this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm actually going to draw the wave line again onto this, and just pretend that I drew this from scratch right now. And then I'm going to make another layer, and underneath I'm just going to color this really, really quickly. I'm not going to think too hard about staying within the lines. So Manga Studio actually lets you store color information in the brushes, which is, for me, one of the coolest features of the software. I don't know if it's possible to do this in other applications, but I know that it didn't used to be possible in a majority of the ones that I was using. And so if that's changed, then great, but Manga Studio has it, and it does it really, really well. So what we can do here is I'm just going to, once again, I'm being really quick and dirty with this. So, all right, let's say I'm happy with this, and I've colored this vine the way that I want to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the line with the color. I'm going to hold down Command or Control, depending on your operating system, and click on the layer image. And what that's going to do is select everything within that layer. And I want to make sure I have that layer selected along with the contents within the layer. I'm going to go up to Edit, Register Image as Material, and that's going to bring up the Material Property box. This is where I can actually create the brush. So what I'm going to do is, under Material Name, I'm going to call it Test Vine Color. And then I'm going to copy that because I'm going to use that again. I'm going to click Use for Brush Tip Shape. That lets the program know what you're trying to do with this. And under location to save material, I'm going to click on image material, expand, and click on brush. Okay, that's going to tell it where to actually store this information. And I'm going to create a search tag for it, and I'm just going to paste my text back so it's test find color, and that will make it easier for me to find later on. Okay, so what I've done is just now I've actually made a new brush. So I'm going to go back to my rule line brush set, and I'm going to duplicate the wave line 2 because I basically just want to use the same brush, same settings anyway. And I'm going to click on this little piece of paper thing down here. That's going to create a copy. And once again, I'm going to paste the text down for test find color, hit OK. And I'm going to once again open up the subtool detail property box. Now, since I showed you under brush tip where the image actually goes, I'm going to click this little white downturned arrow, and that is going to bring up all of my brush stamps. And since I have a whole lot of them in here, I'm going to search for test find color because that's going to pop up the one that I just made. And there it is. So I'll select that, hit OK, and now you can see it's used my colored brush that I just made. So I'll make a new layer and I can test that out. And there it is. So now I'm actually drawing my colored vine very quickly. All right. So that is a really incredible feature, and I think that it's really amazing. And you know, you can use it for so many different things. So if you do have some tasks that are very repetitive, there's something that you're going to be drawing an awful lot. Brush systems are really good to experiment with because they can help you alleviate some of the tedium of some of the more repetitive tasks that you're doing. And you know, maybe if you look at this image, you might get an idea of some of the other things that I'm using brushes for, things that tend to flow and are drawn in a repetitive fashion, for example. So you know, you can maybe even do something that's just a stamp, like for example the flowers that are on the vines. It doesn't always work perfectly. It depends on how much control you want to have on the way that they're popped into the page. Since Dreamside uses a really tight illustrated style, I need a lot of control over how it draws. So I'm using brushes in the way that makes the most sense for my project. But depending on what you're trying to do, you may come up with a lot of creative uses for brushes. So what I'm most anxious to see in the comments below is what you are doing with your projects, how this brush system might help you, and maybe some ideas that you might have for how to use the brush system to create some creative brushes of your own. And as always, feel free to reach out to me on social media and on my website, of course, www.dmcumbo.com. And make sure to subscribe to get email notifications of upcoming Dreamside content and anything that I'm doing that's kind of exciting. And make sure that you click that contact box on my website if you want to send me a message and let me know more about what you're working on. You can always find me on Facebook or on Twitter. I'm DM Cumbo. And you can tweet to me your pics that you're working on and show me some of the cool stuff that you create with the brushes. I'm very anxious to see what you do. So that's going to wrap it up for today. So thank you so much once again for spending time with me this great Friday. I hope it's an awesome day for you, and I hope you are. For artists out there, I hope it's a productive weekend for you. Take advantage of that time off and make this start that project that you've always been wanting to start. Just get going with it because we have such amazing tools that you can do just incredible stuff. And for those of you who are just fans of Dreamside, I hope that this was interesting for you and gave you a bit of a look into some of the development process for Dreamside, some of the cool things that are being done to get the artwork done. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.